that still had a little bit of that art side where I wanted to combine that, but still trying to figure out what can I do that can help others? What is something that I'm still going to be passionate about where I'm not going to feel drained going to work? And that's where UX design really comes in, user experience. The first part of it is the art and design aspect. For me, I love art, visual arts, especially painting and so forth, but also digital. And so that art and design aspect was really calling to me to where it'd be easy for me to get in, understand, and use the skills I currently have. But the next part is really empathy and accessibility. For me, just growing up, I've gone through some challenges in life where it kind of sets you back. And when you go through things, it's easier to understand and empathize with others, whether they are struggling just to go through life, if they're facing different disabilities, different challenges in life. So for me, that empathy portion, really understanding how I can help others, really connect back. Even remembering at University of Maryland, I did a lot of mentoring, I did a lot of volunteering, and that was something I really enjoyed. So for me, UX made the most sense to where I can really focus on empathy, using my skills, combining art and technology, where I'm helping others figure out and solving problems. And so as I go into this next stage, it's really more so about how I got my job. And to start off, I did not do an internship. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, a lot of things happened to where I did get one, and unfortunately they took it back because in 2020, a lot of things were just shutting down and it closed. So at that point, I'll be honest, I was very depressed, very sad, and trying to figure out did I still want to do UX? Do I want to take a different route? Just because within information science, there's different possibilities you can do. So it wasn't until I would say 2021, I was doing I was right where you all were, doing a Makeathon event, and I got to work with my team, and it was such a fun experience. And I was so lucky that my team, we actually got first place for the project we focused on. And from there, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do in life. This is my calling. So I needed to figure out what ways can I still get in, even though I didn't have that internship, because I realized I also didn't want to have to go and get my master's unless I had to. So from there, I decided on networking, this first part. And with networking, there's different ways to go about it. So be brave and put yourself out there. At the time, I know LinkedIn was really helpful for me just to reach out to different people. I know it's nerve-wracking to just go out of your way and say, hello, I want to learn more about what you do and so forth, trying to connect with people. But it's okay to do that and start utilizing some of those UX skills that you learn in order to reach out to them. Really understand their point of view. So by going in and asking them, hey, I wanted to learn more about what you do day to day. I want to hear your story, and kind of go back and forth with them, building that relationship, really understanding them. So that's one thing I did that really helped. Another thing was joining different UX groups. So for example, we have UXTerps. That's a wonderful group that you all can be utilizing, where you have resources and a community within it. And there was another thing I did during the pandemic. I believe it was called Merit. I can look it up and send it out to the team so that they can send it to you all. But it was more so of a way they placed people who are less experienced in the field and putting them with someone with more maturity in it, to where they can get that mentorship, they can talk to them back and forth, learn about what they do from their day to day. And for me, that was really helpful in just understanding what did they do in their day? How did their meetings go? What challenges did they face? Are they still growing? Where in their career are they trying to head to? So it was really helpful for me joining those different groups. And another thing that was really helpful for me was going to different workshops and conferences. At the time, virtual ones were really popular, to where there was so many free events. I found them on LinkedIn. I know UMD itself, different career fairs, that's a great opportunity to learn and grow, ask questions, learn more about what people are doing, learn more about what ways you can set yourself apart to get in. And so that was definitely helpful. And the last part is just using your current network, using the people around you. You never know who can connect you to something without talking to them. Let them know, hey, I'm interested in this field. You can talk to a friend even. They might guide you to someone else, your professors, your TAs, and so forth. So really utilizing that network around you, was very important for me and helpful in getting me further on. Oop. The next part is around portfolio. I'll kind of go through this pretty quickly just due to time, but the first thing I did with my portfolio is really emphasize on my design process. So what exactly are you trying to get across? That's the main thing they're looking at when they're going through your portfolio is your process. Because as a less experienced designer, as you're trying to get in, you're not going to be the best. And that's okay. If you do have the visual skills, please go ahead and do that. Like, that's amazing. But it's your process that really stands you apart. What are you trying to solve? What is your way of working through it and solving that problem? And for me, that's why I did a really big push around design thinking, really around that empathizing, that iteration, and so forth. So remember your design process. Next is leveraging your class projects. I know there's so many courses to where you can take something that you didn't really care for, but beef it up later on. I know for myself, my capstone project, I did not like how it turned out just because I know some of the people on my team, they weren't passionate about it. They weren't going in that field. They just unfortunately got placed in that group. So for me, I definitely used some of them in order to help me build up my portfolio. Another way is getting portfolio reviews. Those are very helpful, getting that senior someone with more experience looking through it to where they can pinpoint areas where you're missing, where you're not as strong as you could be, as well as just using some of your friends as well, just to peer review through. Next is seeking out problems to solve. And this is different ways to where you can make those personal projects. That's what I did to really help my portfolio because I wanted to solve different things that was more helpful to me and that I had more interest in. And so, for example, I saw this one TikTok where a girl, this is my own interest as well. She took Crunchyroll and redesigned it. If you all know, a lot of different apps where you're trying to watch things, they have the worst interface. You're struggling through. You can't even understand, okay, I'm trying to pause it. It keeps going through, or the issues, there's just so many issues. And she redesigned it to where it was so helpful and she got a job later. So seek out different problems, reaching out to your community. That was a big one for me. My personal project that I worked on, it was based off of my parents' cultural organizations they were part of, and their goal is usually trying to get people to come in. And so I had looked at their website and it's a little outdated. So from there, it was so helpful to where I went through, I was more passionate about it. And this kind of ties into the next one, doing projects you enjoy, because from there, even now today, they actually reached out to me and they were saying, yeah, we want to update our website. And so now I have everything ready, prepped and go. So I'm going to be showing that to them later this month or next month. So really leverage that, do things you enjoy. And lastly, practice. When it comes to presenting your portfolio, it does take time getting used to it, but because these are things that you're constantly doing, that practicing, you'll get better at it. That's the same way you learn skills where you're trying to ride a bike. You have to keep trying and trying. So definitely practice and don't overstress while doing it. And so for this next half, I'm going to go into my first year in UX and kind of going through my role. So my official title is I'm an associate UX design consultant at IBM. And I'm not going to touch too much on the consulting side since the previous workshop touched on that. But for me, this role is really helpful in just understanding where I am in my position. I really like my job so far. I've learned so much. And design consultant is a little bit different where you still are being a designer, you get all of that experience there, but now you're working a little bit closer with the client, really understanding the business. What are their goals overall outside of what you're doing? Next, I'm going to touch a bit on industries, and the industry I'm a part of is the government industry. So unfortunately, I can't really say any of the projects I'm working on now, or even in the future, go into detail, but really think about the industries as you're going through. There's so many, there's education, healthcare, nonprofit, and so forth. For me, I wasn't originally looking at industries when applying, but I'm very grateful I went with the government industry just because a lot of government sites, they have very poor UX functionality. A lot of people struggle going through it. I personally hate going on government websites. So going into it, at first I was a little worried where I was like, oh, I might not be able to be as creative as I want to. But now that I'm going through the whole process, there's so much in it. Because of the government federal regulations, you have to make sure your accessibility is up to par. There's different things where you wouldn't have to consider as much if you went maybe more of a commercial route. So I really like the government industry from there. Another thing that is part of my role is safe and agile methodology. So for my project, this is what we use for our organization. And it's just a way of how things flow throughout the project. And I'm not going to touch on that too much, but I want to go in more so around the cross-functional team. And that's just the dynamic of how Agile works, where it's really an iterative process. And so for a cross-functional team, at least for my own design team, it's really helpful for the way we work because we have all of the skill sets we need and it's quite diverse. So on my team, we have a set of customer experience and data researchers. We have our UI, UX designers and developers. And that's not very common for a team to have so many people of one. Usually I know for some of the designers at my job, they're usually like the only designer on that project and they're just doing everything by themselves, or it's going to be just a team of designers. And then from there, we're missing out on different areas that we need. So by having that cross-functional team, it really helped my team overall work through our project, work through our flows, whether it's a component or such we need help on, we can go to a developer, get inside feedback. Oh, I need to make sure that it's following certain rules that I wouldn't have considered as developer because I don't have that background. Or so around the data, our data researchers, where we're starting to consider our customers, where what feedback we can get from them, what insights are we getting, where are they clicking and why? And so that can help our design in that iterative process. And so these are just some of the potential activities I do day to day. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm just going to say for those who do want to go into UX design, I would say a daily stand up, make sure those are just more so of your team coming together and you're letting them know where you are and what you're working on. Is it going well? What's going wrong? And if you have any blockers. And then another thing I want to touch on is around documentation, where starting off, I did not realize I was going to have to write so much. You document everything you do. When you make your designs, you need to annotate it. Before you even get into design, that research part, you have to document everything you found, organize, analyze it, and so forth. So that documentation part, really take point in it. And then another point I do want to touch on is facilitating workshops. This might not be something all of you would have to do, but because I'm a design consultant, we do it to where we help our clients understand more of that user-focused approach, but we're also making sure we're hearing our clients on where they're coming from around the business and what elements that they are missing. So it kind of helps all of us get into the same room and be on the same page. And these are some of the areas that I focus on currently. First is design thinking. IBM, they also have their own enterprise design thinking, and it's just a way for people, and you don't have to be a designer to use this. You can literally be going about your everyday. And it's just a way of coming up with solutions to solve problems in different ways. So the first is around focusing on user outcome, really putting users first, understanding their needs. What are their pain points, what challenges they're going through, what is working for them, what isn't, and why isn't it working? Next is around relentless reinvention. Really, that's part of that ideating, coming up with ideas. No idea is a bad idea, what they say, but put those risky ideas out there. Even if it doesn't make sense, you can build off of that. You can take it and narrow it down to what you exactly need. And then around the next, and within that one, I also do want to touch, you don't always have to reinvent what you're doing. There's so many things people have already done that you can take and build off of that. So that's just something to keep in mind there. And then diverse, empowered teams. You want to make sure your team is well balanced, where you have all the SMEs that you need, different areas of focus to where you can come together and build off of that. Next is around customer experience. Customer experience, the difference between that and user experience is where user experience focus more on the usability, functionality, how people are using it. Customer experience more so is on how they feel about it, that impression of those sites, impression of what they're using. That comes in with the customer feedback, where you might see a lot of times when you finish using something, they'll send you a survey for feedback or so forth, or even around Google Analytics and understanding how people are going and navigating to your site, how they're discovering you. So that definitely helps with understanding that. And it's really the business putting customers first. And this is their way of engaging our customers, engaging them and making sure that they're within the process so that we're designing, we're not forgetting about what they truly need or what they're going to be going against and so forth. And another part to touch on, since I am on the federal side, there is an executive order around that. So now all federal agencies, they do have to engage and focus on customer experience to make sure that we're providing the public the best experience we possibly can. And lastly is around design systems library. For my team, we use it and it's so helpful, especially in my day-to-day. So it's basically a collection of reusable design assets and components. And this really means those portions of your header, different buttons you have, field inputs, also your color palette, typography, even page templates. So page template could be like a contact page where you can reuse it and reorganize. And this way it helps us establish design standards so that the team is in unison, we are all flowing together, we're not having any issues, any inconsistencies and so forth. So the benefits are consistency, efficiency, scalability, and I really want to touch on the collaboration where we're not only for designers, but for developers to where we work together and making sure we're bringing the best experience. And so for the key takeaways, first, I want to say, make sure you're doing continuous learning. Continuing to learn is so important in this field. There's so many things going on, different trends. I know, for example, I know AI is such a big one going on. Making sure you understand that there's also the different industries. You don't have to stay in one place. There's so many fields within it, whether you want to be a UX designer or maybe you want to take a different route and you want to go into customer experience or a UX researcher or even content writer, a UX content writer, which we need so much more of, please. Next, I also want to say is say yes. At times when you're first getting in, you might want to back off and just watch and see what everyone else is doing. I just say, don't do that. Say yes. It's okay to say yes. At first, you might feel uncomfortable. It might be new to you. You're going through that. But saying yes for me helped me so much. The amount of opportunities I've got to do a workshop with the MBA students at Georgetown University. I also, because I kept saying yes to different things, one of my leads noticed, and she invited me to go to Switzerland, where I got to help with them on a facilitation for global health. So you never know what happens when you say yes. Next is keep networking. And it's not even to say you have to keep going on LinkedIn and be very stressed out every day. No, you can network within your job. My job, at least, it's very big. There's so many people out there outside of my practice, and yet there's so many things you can learn from them. And by having that network, you're building a community within UX. You're building a community to where you can rely on those people when you're struggling or when you're trying to solve different problems and so forth. And lastly, stay positive. I feel this is such an exciting field where I get to learn and grow, but I also get to be creative and help others and focus on empathy and so forth. And yes, there'll be challenges, but when you have your team and you're going through it, and at the end of the day, when you solve that problem and the client loves it, it's all worth it. So thank you so much for having me. And I'll give some time for questions. Sorry, I know I talked a lot.
I can get started. So some of the design challenges that the participants are actually solving is based on the USWDS as well.
Oh.
So as you were talking about, initially it feels like it's very constraining to be in that like regular design system because there's only a certain color palette you can use. How do you as a designer kind of break those constraints? And sometimes you of course can, but I guess how do you be creative at that?
Yeah, that's actually an issue my team has a lot of times since our color palette is very limited. There's only so many we can choose from. So we started thinking of different ways of how we can lay it out. I know, for example, we actually did use the look at me forgetting the name of it. It's yes, the USWDS as well as a reference for our DSL. And so it's helpful for us just coming up with different ways of like putting it out there. So an example would be taking like various buttons and trying different colors for it. Usually we have a set of like secondary, primary colors and so forth that you would use for it. So trying to like switch up which colors you use, also thinking about like different ways of how people are viewing it, which parts are like more primary, where as some buttons, you may not need to use it too often. So another issue, like in my team, we noticed we started using one color too much, like blue was just too much for us. So we tried taking some of those secondary colors and putting it in. There's only so much you can do, but you know, try to be as creative as you can and go with that. Hope that answers the question.
Know that. Thank you so much.
At one point you mentioned, like within networking, a good thing was to go to like conferences and stuff like that. Are you aware of any like specific conferences that you really enjoy? Or maybe even some that like you would suggest maybe you don't have to go to?
Gosh, it's been a while. At least for me, I think it was like 2021. There was just so many like career for like UX conferences happening on LinkedIn. So I'm not sure if they're doing it as much, but in terms of trying to find it, I know UMD, there's like different orgs where it helps a lot of students like to go to those conferences. I'm blanking on the different ones out there, but there was like this one that's really big. What was it around? Yes, that was one. So there's just different ones there. At least for me, I just watched a lot of the ones that I could go for free at the time. But even if you can't go to a conference, even looking at like different career fairs can help you as well, just talking to the people around you. And I know they aren't looking at freshmen or sophomores sometimes, so it can be challenging, but just putting yourself out there and just say, hey, I just want to learn more about what you're doing is really helpful overall, as well as just maybe going on LinkedIn and seeing what other people are doing. I know Adobe has different conferences as well, and I watched that one a lot too. So I don't know if they're having it in April or if it already passed, but kind of look out to see the different ones. Maybe on LinkedIn might be helpful, or even just searching UX conferences on Google.
Do you mind like reflecting on your, do you mind sharing, reflecting your time here at UMD? Is there anything you thought you would have like done differently being an undergrad? Like anything you felt like would have helped you get ahead more during your time as a student?
Yes. First, at least picking the right major would have been really helpful. But definitely just reaching out and talking to more of my classmates. I think I was a little more reserved. I'm very introverted. So for me, if I could go back, I definitely talk to more people who are in UX, or even not even just UX, like computer science majors, different art majors who are like doing graphic design and so forth, just to get different input, as well as maybe talking to more of my professors too, and finding out what are their interests. If you find out you have a professor that may be more so into the career field you're specifically looking for within UX, I'd recommend talking to them, building that relationship, your TAs and so forth. So probably communicating more.
My next question would be that you mentioned you weren't able to land an internship during your undergrad year because of COVID. So how was the transition from graduating until you actually landed your first job? What did that look like for you?
It was challenging. I will say that it was very challenging. And even before getting the job, that was the really big challenge of just trying to stay positive and keep going. I remembered, I think I stopped counting how many rejections I got after I got to 100. So I know, and I know it sounds really rough, but it is tough to get in. I will say that, which is why trying to build that community, really reaching your network and going so forth would be really helpful. But during that time, once I got my job, I still wanted to keep up with like my skill set. So I would continue to do different projects on my own and reach out to different people. So like I said, even though I had a portfolio focusing on my parents' cultural organization, I did that for the portfolio, but I kept going further back into it, really iterating on my designs, looking into which ways I can improve it, getting that user feedback. So I would test it on my family. At one point, they kind of got annoyed with me, but really just utilizing the people I had around me and trying to stay positive. Like I had the job, I just had to wait to start the job. So.
If people don't have any more questions, we're gonna close this out and get ready for the next time. But thank you all for being here. If you wanna.
Thank you for having me.
Connected to Boma, feel free